this year. Please join me in welcoming SCAG President Bill Young. Today by Sarah Jetson, the SCAG's active transportation planner.
Well, thanks, Phil. I'd like to first thank the President Barham and the Chief Executive Officer Rodriguez for inviting me here this afternoon to speak about SCAG's efforts to comply with the RADA requirements. Let me begin by saying housing is a very important issue to me, both professionally and personally. My dad was a builder, my brother was a builder, I grew up in the industry, and it's one that I'm passionate about. And it's one of my highest priorities as President of SCAG. Before I retired, for the last 15 years of my career, I made a living as an affordable housing developer. My company built about 800 units throughout the Inland Empire and Los Angeles County. And we currently own a little over 100 units that we built, manage, and control. So, and over the past decade, at SCAG, I've had the opportunity, as mentioned earlier, to serve on 2 RADA subcommittees and the RADA reform subcommittee, which I chair. While the main focus on regional planning has historically been on transportation planning, one of my incentives at SCAG is to go beyond the RADA process and focus on housing issues. Now, with the recent funding of the state that goes directly to COGS like SCAG, SCAG now has more tools to address the housing issues besides just RADA and help cities actually get housing built across our region. RADA, also known as the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, is one of those buzzwords that really gets people excited. And for some, raises their blood pressure. And fortunately, we only have to do this once every 8 years. But it's really a quantification of how much housing that each jurisdiction, meaning the cities and counties, will need to plan for their housing element in their general plan. It's housing that's needed in the future, and it's housing that's needed now. We've all seen the housing crisis that's going on in the local, regional, and state level. The fact is that our housing production has not kept up with population growth over the past few decades. It has come to a head in the last few years, and we're really seeing the impact on all levels. In past RADA cycles, the emphasis has been on future housing needs. In this cycle, however, for better or for worse, the state is more involved in the RADA process and is requiring an emphasis on unmet existing needs that has been building up for long periods of time. Things like overcrowding and cost-burdened households, those who pay more than 30% of their household income on housing, are looked at seriously from a regional level, and we are focusing in meeting the needs for those who need housing yesterday and today. Because of the emphasis on the unmet needs, we're seeing a larger regional number given to us by the state than we've seen in the past. A whopping 1.34 million units to be built over the next 10 years just in our region. To put this in perspective, even though it was a recession environment, our number in the last RADA cycle was about 412,000 units. There was also more involvement from advocates, residents, and special interest groups. Before, it was mostly just jurisdictions involved in the process. Now we have NIMBY groups, we have YIMBY groups, and other interest groups. All have very different perspectives on where the housing should go and what factors SCAG should consider in determining the housing need. RADA is a critical step in fixing the housing crisis. It's important to businesses and builders specifically. RADA projects how much housing is needed, but that's only the starting point. Once the city receives its allocation, to be in compliance, it has to zone for enough sites to accommodate these units. It's only the start of helping to get housing built. Raina also shows where we're going to grow throughout the region. There is a wide range of factors that are tied into the housing, such as job accessibility, transit, access to resources, and opportunities. The Raina process tries to tie all of this together so that businesses, especially developers and builders, can link where the housing needs to go. I will tell you that SCAG is working diligently to support the region in meeting our housing goals. And we want to make sure that we're engaging the building communities as we move forward. The passage of Assembly Bill 101 earlier this year created a new program with $250 million for funding for cities and counties and regions to start planning activities that lead to increased housing production. With resources from AB 101, SCAG is in the process of developing a local government-supported assistance program where we are starting the outreach process for this funding program. At the SCAG executive retreat earlier this year, I brought in housing experts Steve Fontel and Randall Lewis to help inform and engage SCAG leadership on the challenges and solutions of the housing crisis, and to discuss opportunities for shaping this new program to address these challenges. I'm also launching a housing task force focused on the program development, which will include builders and BIA representation. By this spring, we're expecting to complete the analysis of local barriers to housing development, working closely with our university partners and engaging local developers. These are just a few of the things that we're doing at SCAG to help ease the housing crisis. However, we cannot do this alone. We need developers and builders up and down the state to engage our cities and counties and form partnerships to build all types of housing, be it single or multifamily, units at all price points. In closing, I can tell you that if you need SCAG's help, we have a variety of tools in our toolbox, and we are committed to go beyond RADA and assist in any way we can to bring these units to market. Now, before we open it up for questions, I'd like to invite Sarah Jetson to join me at the podium. Sarah is our planning director at SCAG, and she's going to provide details on where we are in the RADA process and review draft allocation methodology that has been proposed for identifying the share of units that we need in our region. So please welcome Sarah Jetson.
Thank you, President Jan, and nice to see many of you today, including our policy committee members from SCAG. I understand there is some pretty good knowledge of RENA here in the room today, so I'm hoping that to provide the level of detail that makes this topic approachable, but I also wanted to let you know that I'm here afterwards to answer any more specific questions that you might have. We understand this is a very complicated process, and there's going to need to be a lot of one-on-one discussions with cities and city staff in order to make it as clear as possible about how the housing allocations are established and the ways we can support cities in moving forward. So I do have a couple of slides. So I have been in this acting role at SCAG as planning director for about 6 months now. And the thing that I was introduced to when I came into RENA was that first of all, no one likes it, so just be prepared for that. And second of all, it's very complicated. And I'm afraid I probably won't be able to address the first. I don't expect everyone to leave the room and love RENA, but I'm hoping to make this as simple as possible. And again, I'm here to answer your questions afterwards. So at a high level, I want to go through the objectives of RENA. First, it's to increase the supply of housing and housing types across the region in an equitable manner. It's to promote infill development, socioeconomic equity, protecting our agricultural resources. This number 2 objective I just call good planning. The goal is to promote good planning. Objective number 3 is to improve the integration and coordination between jobs and housing, better address our jobs housing balance. And number 4 and 5 The priorities that are outlined here are pretty much saying that we don't want to give more of the same to communities. So we want to make sure there is a mix of income levels in our communities across the region. So if you're in areas that has a lot of high-income housing, we want to make sure that there's also opportunities for lower-income people to live in those areas, and vice versa. If it's a low-income community, we want to make sure there's opportunities for high-income folks to find opportunities to live in those places. So we're trying to get a greater mix for the state goals. Our RENA process has been going on for a while. We've had a subcommittee, I think, since February. But some major milestones we achieved this summer. As President Yan mentioned, in the summer we received our regional determination from the Housing and Community Development Department. And that is the number that we need to achieve region-wide. And as was mentioned, we were given a number of 1.34 million housing units. So once we have that regional number, we at SCAG developed a methodology that we've been working on throughout the fall about how those housing units are going to be distributed among the cities and unincorporated areas of the county. So that methodology is what I'm mostly going to focus on today. And then after we've developed our methodology, we will provide it to HCD for their feedback, and then we'll have an opportunity to revisit that methodology this winter. And once it is approved, the draft allocation and the numbers will be allocated to each of the cities. So after that, we go through an appeals process, and when that is complete, the final RENA allocation is expected to come out in October 2020. And then our cities have until October 21 to update their housing elements in line with the RENA. This is a little bit more detail on that schedule. The main thing I just want to highlight is where we are right now with the draft and the methodology. Our subcommittee did act on October 7th to advance the staff recommendation to our Community Economic Housing and Development Committee on October the 21st. And we are, if they act to advance the methodology, it will then go to our board in November. And if the regional council approves it, it then goes to Housing and Community Development for their feedback. So there's a lot happening over the next couple of weeks and months. And so again, this is another reason why we really want to make sure people are understanding the methodology and have the opportunity to provide feedback through our policy committees as we move towards advancing the methodology to the state. So a little bit more information on the regional determination that we have received. As was mentioned, this number is far higher than in any other cycle that we've had. So in the fifth cycle, as was mentioned, our housing need region-wide was 400,000 units, and now we have received a determination of 1.34 million units. We did provide a letter to HCD to appeal this number, as we feel like there are some ways in which their methodology didn't account for some of our local conditions. And we're expecting to hear back from them actually next week, around October 14th or 15th is the deadline that they have to get back to us with our final regional determination. Now, even though we've appealed the number, we recognize that we are in a housing crisis, and I don't know that, we feel that strongly that our number will go down that much. We understand that the numbers are going to be much higher this time around. And in large part, it's because, as President Yan mentioned, we're not only thinking about housing for the future population, but we've been asked to address this issue of existing need. An existing need, they're looking at our households that are overburdened, over-cost burdened, and overcrowded. And so the way we currently look at the number that was given to us from the state, about 500,000 of the units that they've given to us kind of relate to housing the future population. But then they're looking for us to build another 800,000 units to address the existing need. So this existing need is a really big part of where the RENA numbers are going to be this time around, and makes for especially a difficult challenge in this cycle. So I hope many of you have been engaged in the process so far. As we've come up with worked on developing our methodology, we originally came up with 3 different options for how we would allocate the housing units across the region. And we released all of those for public comment on August the 1st. And we had a lot of great feedback from cities and counties, as well as from the community overall. As was mentioned, there are a lot of new stakeholders involved in this process this time around because of the great interest and need for housing. So our public comment period for those 3 options, as we get feedback, was from August the 1st to September the 13th. We had many public hearings, approximately 250 people attended in person and via our webcast, and we received feedback, verbal feedback and written comments through that process. Over 248 comments were submitted up until our September 13th deadline. And the numbers here reiterating that this time around we received lots of input from our local jurisdictions and our subregions. About 48% of the comments came from those stakeholders. But unlike previous cycles, we've had a lot more participation and interest from advocacy organizations, residents groups, and the general public. So those have all been considerations from our policymakers as we've been deciding on which pathways to move forward. So after we did this process and got the feedback, the staff came up with a new methodology which combines bits and pieces of the 3 options that we put out there. The other important input that we got was feedback from HCD, and several of our options they felt like didn't go far enough in affirmatively forwarding fair housing, so addressing the need of a variety of mix of incomes and communities. So we had to make some adjustments as we put together the staff recommended allocation methodology in order to address those concerns. I'm going to now move on to the staff preferred or staff recommended allocation, and it gets fairly complex fairly quickly, so I'm going to try to keep it pretty high level. I think a core thing that needs to be understood is kind of the background or the basis for our allocation methodology is that it connects with Connect SoCal, which is our long-range transportation plan. And in that plan, we're trying to balance the needs for land use and housing with the transportation network in order to meet a wide range of goals, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving mobility, and addressing and promoting economic development. So because Connect SoCal has this broader multidisciplinary perspective, when we are bringing in the housing planning, we want to make sure that it connects to the broader visioning process that goes on for the region. So the main factors that we are using in the allocation methodology come from Connect SoCal, and these include the growth forecast that is developed for our Connect SoCal plan, the transit accessibility, which is established through the planning process, and then also looking at job accessibility based off of the modeling that we do for our plan. The other reason that it's important that our methodology is really rooted in the plan is that we go through a very rigorous 2-year process with local jurisdictions to put that plan together. And so we think it's really important that, we're able to tie the feedback that we get from local jurisdictions through that process to the work that we're now called to do here in housing. So I'm going to go through each of these factors that influence the methodology real quick. The growth forecast, I hope many of you and your cities have certainly participated in over the last couple of years. So our growth forecast looks at the projected growth that's going to occur from 2020 to 2045. And through that process, we developed numbers at a jurisdictional level of the households, the jobs, and the population that each city or unincorporated area is looking to accommodate. This process starts for us at a regional level. We work with a panel of experts to understand the demographic trends. And then we take that regional number and we boil it down to county, and then we boil it down to city, and we work with each of the jurisdictions to figure out how they're planning to grow to accommodate the growth in the future. So the growth forecast, which is the basis of our plan, then also becomes one of the primary factors that is used in our RENA allocation methodology. And some of the graphics on the page just reflect some of the resources and outreach that we did to the local jurisdictions, where we'll provide them with a data map book that says this is how we understand households and jobs and population coming to your region or your city, and then they provide feedback back to us. So it's a very back and forth technical process. The second factor to highlight that is part of our allocation methodology is transit accessibility. And transit accessibility is obviously a key metric in our long-range transportation plan in Connect SoCal because it is important for us in advancing mobility while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For transit accessibility, we look at the share of the population that's going to be located in our high-quality transit areas, and you can see a map of those here on the screen. Obviously, access to transit is also important on the housing side of things, as it is a way for people to access the jobs, which is an important component of RENA. A final factor that is comes from Connect SoCal that is included in our allocation methodology is job accessibility, and we developed this metric with the use of our transportation model that is developed for the plan. And for the job accessibility metric, we're looking at the share of the regional jobs that are accessible by auto in 30 minutes. And oftentimes we get pushback about, why are you looking just at cars and auto ownership or a 30-minute auto trip? And we're doing this because, in large part, we understand that in the future, most people will still be driving to their jobs. And so the 30-minute understanding how many jobs they can reach in 30 minutes is an important factor to consider. And also the transit accessibility factor has already been considered in another area. So as you can see, and I think it's probably well understood just by our experience living in Southern California, our densest job centers and the places where you have the best access are reflected in the red, and there's fewer opportunities as you move inland. So these factors then are applied in a couple different ways in order for a jurisdiction to get to their total jurisdictional total housing need. What we've done is we're looking at the jurisdiction's projected housing needs, so that growth that you're going to need in order to accommodate the future population, plus the growth that you're going to need to accommodate the existing need, and that's how you get to your final RENA number. Going through each of these just real quick, and then how they relate to those factors I just described. For the projected need, or the need that's based off your future population growth, we're using our growth forecast, and we're looking at the household growth that was worked to develop with the cities and unincorporated areas between 2020 and 2030. Now, in the old days, this is kind of where we would have stopped, and we would have taken this projected need number and the growth forecast from our plan, and we would have allocated it into different income groups, and that would be your RENA number. So it was really strongly connected to the growth projections that were in our plan. But then now, as was mentioned, we also need to be considering this existing housing need. And so we need to find more areas in which to put new housing units. And so for existing need, even though the RENA period only goes to 2030, we are going to look at what cities were planning from 2030 to 2045 in terms of their growth, because that gives us a good perspective about some of the good planning that cities are doing and helping us understand where they're seeing opportunities for future growth. The other factors that we're looking at are transit accessibility in this for the existing need, as well as job accessibility. So those factors get applied at a higher level in this existing need. So existing need, in order to get to that number, we weight those factors that I mentioned, and in our current methodology, 50% of your need is going to be based off the share of the household growth, which again this is connected to the growth forecast in Connect SoCal. 25% of the weighting here is related to the job accessibility factor, and the final 25% relates to the share of the population in high-quality transit areas, so relating to transit accessibility. There's a second step that then we layer on, once after we do that initial analysis of existing need and come up with the allocation. We have decided, or we're looking at, after the first run of the existing housing need, we've determined that many jurisdictions were exceeding even what they were planning for in 2045. And in order to moderate that a little bit, we put a cap for the most part on those areas, and anything above your 2045 forecast, we're now calling the residual need. And that residual need, we then reassign to the cities that have the highest transit and job accessibility, but then we removed areas that have extremely disadvantaged communities because that is something that the state is certainly concerned about. This residual need is about 140,000 units, and so it has been largely spread, as I said, to the highest job accessibility and highest transit accessibility areas. Okay, so just to review, circling back, after we've looked at these factors that relate to both the projected need and your jurisdictions, how the factors affect the existing housing need, we add them together to get your total RHNA number. Once you have your total RHNA number, the jurisdiction RHNA allocation needs to be split across 4 different income groups that are assigned by the state, and that's the very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income. And we apply certain factors of social equity that have been determined by the state in order to take that your total RHNA number and put it into those 4 income categories. So with this approach, just quick in summary, and then I can get to questions. We believe with this approach that we are hitting on all of the RHNA objectives, including increasing the housing supply, promoting infill development, protecting our own open spaces, improving the job housing relationship, avoiding overconcentration of income groups, and affirmatively forwarding fair housing per the state requirements. And then our next steps, as was mentioned, the RHNA subcommittee acted on October 7th to advance this staff recommended alternative, and we will be back again to our policy committees on October 21st, seeking their direction, and then hoping that we will be advancing a methodology so that we can have a final methodology by January or February of 2020. And with that, make sure to write this down if you're interested in this process. There is a lot more information on our website, including the frequently asked questions, as well as a calculator that helps you better understand how this methodology is applied in each of the jurisdictions. You can see in that calculator how each of those factors ends up affecting your total number. Okay, great.
Let's give Sarah and Bill a round of applause. If you had a burning question, hold it, because we're going to have a rapid fire number of questions after our next presentation. So we'll have all our speakers come up, and then we'll take questions here. Just want to highlight for our friends at SCAG and to all of the cities here in attendance today, when we look at the 1.3 million units and the portion that's going to be allocated, whatever number they arrive at for your respective city, we can probably bet that it's going to be more than the last cycle. So all the more importance of collaboration, all the more importance for us to just say as the BIA, we're here to work with you to help meet your RHNA obligations. We understand that it's not going to be business as usual as far as what happened in past RHNA cycles to compare to this, upcoming arena cycle and what the governor expects and what types of carrots and sticks that he has brought forth. So all the more importance for us to, as the BIA, again, we're here to work with you. We want to help ensure that we can meet the housing demands and those that are going to be highlighted when the allocations come forward. I would just say that that's for RENA, and as this new development code goes into effect, if we can get clarification as to projects that are in the pipeline currently, how those are going to be handled, it would be really great to know that and to work with each of the 11 cities and all 24 throughout our county. But the cities that are here today, we'd love to have that conversation off-site with you so we can share with our members how the line will be in the sand regarding the new development code. Also, Senate Bill 743 needs to be implemented by next July. That highlights a reduction on vehicle miles traveled as part of the development process and as part of the CEQA and as part of each of your general plans. We would ask that for those cities here today that we could find out from you where you are in that status of the VMT process. We really would like to work with you on that front. And finally, I think we would really urge you to work with us and to meet with us quarterly to talk about what we can do to, I think, arguably the most important thing that could be done is to look at certainty in the development process. If there's a way to ensure that at a plan check and a design review level that we can have some clarity and some really, again, certainty as to that process and work with you to identify strategies to streamline the process on both of those fronts, on the plan check and design review fronts. That would really probably be the #1 thing we can do to ensure that we'll meet those challenges that are going to be ahead of us. So, that said, I'd like to shift gears to our next speaker, and the Southern California Edison partnership that we have is greatly appreciated. California continues to lead the nation in energy efficiency. Under the ambitious legislation of AB 32 and SB 375, California is now on a path to reduce carbon emissions by 80% of 1990 levels by 2050. The home building industry continues to do our part in building homes that are the most energy efficient and water efficient in the nation. However, to meet this ambitious goal set forth by the state legislature, we need a comprehensive approach. Today, we are pleased to have Mark Cloud of Southern California Edison share some thoughts about their proposed 3-part integrated solution. Please join me in welcoming Mark Cloud.
All right, I'm a petite guy, as you can see, and I tend to move around a lot, so I'm going to do my best to untether myself, if you don't mind. Is that okay with you guys? Hold the safety strip up, don't trip. All right, so thanks for having us. SCE really appreciates the partnership we have with BIA, and actually I'd like to start with a round of applause for the BIA. They bring us all together routinely, and frankly, they make California a better place. So thank you, BIA, for all that you do, and thanks for the partnership you allow us to have together. I'm going to talk about what we're doing, very high-level overview, what we're doing as a company to reduce a real threat to health in Southern California, and I'll be talking about that. I'll tell you what that is. I think you all probably might have an idea about what that is. But first, let's agree on something. California, for good or bad, is a great place to live, right? It's a fantastic place to live. And we have our problems, there's some downsides and some trade-offs, we know that. But we live in a great state. I tell my kids, they're young, well, one's 2 months, she's not talking yet. 6 and 4 years old, I tell them, you are very fortunate. You were born in the United States. And you weren't just born in the United States, you were born in Southern California. You're very, very fortunate. They don't quite understand it yet, but I'm going to drive that point home as I raise them. But we live in a great state. It's a beautiful place, but it has a problem. We have a smog problem, do we not? We have a real smog problem. When I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, I was raised in Riverside, born and raised, still live there. When I was a kid, there were smog days on the playground. Who remembers smog days? Remember that? The yellow flag was a black dot. What did that mean? Do not run on the field. Why? Because particulate matter will, at a higher level, will be ingested into your system. Bad news for kids. The good news is, thanks to regulation and a couple of other things that have happened in the state since then, air quality has gotten better, right? We don't have smog days anymore that I'm aware of. I asked around, and I don't think there are smog days on the playground anymore. So hopefully we can retire that nasty yellow flag for blacked out forever. Let's hope we can do that. But we do have an air quality problem still to address. How many of you have grandchildren or children with asthma? Raise your hand, please. How many of you have asthma? All right. My son, Charlie, is 6 years old. He has asthma. He was born with it, so it wasn't brought about necessarily by air pollution. But he was born with it. My wife has it too. My main goal today is to avoid tripping on this cord. So my son, Charlie, has asthma. And has anyone ever seen a child struggle to breathe with asthma? It's atrocious. It's heart-wrenching. I hate it. My son has experienced that. And it's not made any better by the air pollution problem that we have in Southern California. So we as a state, and all of us in the room, frankly, you talked about a coalition kind of response to the environmental factors that we have in our state to deal with. It's going to require all of us working together to reduce the air pollution risks that we face here in Southern California. So let's get into that a little bit. Who saw the smog coming in today? I did. I was driving on the 10 freeway, saw the smog. We all think, sometimes we think, it's just mist, or it's just kind of like a haze. Well, no, it's full of physical particles. Those particles lodge themselves in your lungs. And it's not just a short-term breathing issue, it's a long-term disease issue. So we have got to fix this smog problem, or we're going to be dealing with this for a long, long time to come. Edison plays a role. The state has set some ambitious goals for reducing the air quality problem in California. As you can see here, they want to reduce emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Those are ambitious. California is not known for being, let's just say they like progressive goals, right? So, so these are some big goals to make, and there's a lot of folks who need to contribute to this. The building industry needs to contribute to this. The transportation sector needs to contribute to this. The economy, or the folks that back the economy, i.e. factories and distribution centers, we all play a role. Edison plays a big role, in part because we help contribute to and have for generations to the air pollution problem. I'll get into why. Here are some of the causes of air pollution in our state. Transportation, not a shocker there, right? We all get around in cars. Cars have been producing emissions for a long, long time. Did you know that the EV has actually been around for like over 100 years? There's a great picture of Thomas Edison sitting in an electric vehicle around 1905, 1907. The technology for EVs has been around forever, but for whatever reason, perhaps the market forces dictated that instead we drive gas-powered cars. So that went out, fine. It's great for freedom, personal freedom. We don't have to wait on a train loading dock to wait for our ride to work. We can go wherever we want, whenever we want. There's a trade-off. The trade-off is the air pollution problem. All right, so 39% comes from transportation. 19% is our fault, right? Edison has played a role in increasing the air pollution risk that we face in Southern California. 19% comes from us and the electricity providers. For a long, long time, we were producing electricity via fossil fuel-based resources, either out of state or regionally, and our main goal was just to get it to you safely and reliably and affordably. Our core business is changing over time. For a lot of us, that's true, because society is changing, policies are changing. But we now we're taking this seriously. We need to do what we can as a company to reduce the air pollution problem that we've contributed to. And so we play an important role. So these are the three areas that we are focusing on in our clean power electrification pathway. One, we're setting out to decarbonize the electric sector. Again, going back to that 19%, we play a role in smog. We're going to play a big role in reducing smog. And so we're looking at things like, of course, renewables. We're looking at removing carbon-producing resources from our power portfolio, and we are. We're hitting our goals. So we're going to have more wind and solar, geothermal, et cetera, hydropower, et cetera. We're looking at and we're working very hard on electrifying the transportation sector. Again, the largest contributor to smog in California is the transportation sector. There is no reason why we shouldn't now, with the market viability of electric vehicles and batteries, etc., why we shouldn't be going hard on this front. We need to electrify transportation. We're starting with personal transport, right? How many of you drive an EV today, or a plug-in hybrid? Just 2. Very surprising. I feel like you can't go a block. You were okay, Mr. Spagnolo, thank you. You do too. I feel like you can't go a block without seeing a Tesla today, which is awesome. I want a Tesla, really bad. My wife says not yet. I want a Tesla. They're really cool. The good news is, if you want to drive an EV, you don't have to drive a Leaf anymore. Remember the Leaf is the only car available for a while. Now we have, for those of you who can afford it, the Fisker Karma, beautiful car, the Tesla, and lots of other cars. I just learned that Mercedes-Benz, and this is where it's going to require multiple agencies participating in reducing the smog problem. Mercedes-Benz, tell me if you've heard this, or raise your hand if you've heard this, is now moving R&D dollars completely away from the combustion engine and is now focusing those dollars on clean fuel technology, right? And so that's huge. That's saying that, and they're, you know, if Mercedes is doing it, then likely others will follow. The automaking industry, a huge player in this space, they are now making it possible for us to drive EVs if you want to. Hugely important. The prices are coming down, the cars don't look as weird, and range anxiety, which was really, really a big thing about 10 years ago, frankly is diminishing over time and will continue to. And we're going to help with that because we're going to build out the infrastructure. Finally, building electrification. This is the newest piece. Remember when CFLs came out and the incandescents went away and everyone said, this is not right. My house is going to look funny inside now, and the LED technology, if you're going LED, is not reliable. And remember when Jimmy Carter put solar panels in the White House and then Reagan came in and took them right back out, and everyone kind of mocked good old Jimmy Carter, which by the way, he's doing better. I don't know if you know, he had a fall, and he's still building houses. That guy's doing all right. So he put the solar panels up. We all kind of scoffed because the technology wasn't ready yet, but now it is, right? Who has solar on their homes or businesses? I don't believe most of you, I think some of you do, and you're just not saying so. Because there's a lot of solar in California. We have so much solar, in fact, that we have a glut of solar. We have oversupply on some days, and the California Independent System Operator, which is grid control, ground control for our grid, sometimes they don't even know what to do with that much power. It creates a new, arguably good challenge for us in the state. So there's a lot of solar now on buildings, and it's going to help power and make it possible to electrify buildings and make building electrification possible. This is the new space that we're going into, and I brought those other examples up because, you know, we did work through the solar problem, right? The solar viability issue. We did work through, and we are, the EV adoption problem, and we did work through the incandescent problem, right? We're now, in my house, there's a lot of LEDs, and they were fine. They're doable even. Anyway, we've worked through those issues, and we're going to work through this one too. So what does it look like to decarbonize the electric sector? I already went over it, but you know, this graphic kind of sums it up. More wind, more solar, more geothermal, more hydro. We can get there. We are getting there. We're hitting our own standards for hitting these goals, but we're also going to hit the state's standards for increasing the amount of renewable energy that we have in our portfolio. We are getting rid of fossil fuels and coal, and as, I don't know if you know, even nuclear, although clean, is not even an option for us anymore, right? So we have to now dive further and further into these resources. The good news is the technology works. It's getting better over time, and it's producing more and more power over time. This is a good thing. Electrify the transportation sector. What does it mean? It means building up the infrastructure. It means making sure that there are enough charging stations around Southern California and across the state to ensure that you can get from point A to B to C and back home safely without worrying about being needing to call AAA, right, to come give you a charge. We're building out that infrastructure, and some of you probably participate in our Charge Ready pilot program where we help pay for charging infrastructure. We're going to be pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into electrifying the transportation sector by putting up infrastructure like this. And we're also going to be looking at, how are we going to electrify the medium, light, and heavy duty transport sector, right? Because they're producing a lot of smog too. Tesla, Volvo, they're working on electric semis. Can you imagine that? We're not quite there yet, but we're going to get there, and it's really great because imagine if all of the cars on the road, including buses and trucks, imagine if they were no longer producing emissions. Our smog problem would be drastically reduced, and people like my son Charlie won't have to struggle in the soccer field anymore. All right, so in electrified buildings, this is a new space. This is an emergent kind of space with emerging technology. I want to dispel a myth that you may have heard. Edison does not want to take away your gas appliances. Who's heard that? We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. We want you to have freedom of choice. Edison is full of people who love customer choice. We don't want anyone to take away our right to choose what we power our kitchen with, right? Or heat our water with. We do, however, want to go into this space because if we don't, we're missing a big opportunity to reduce air pollution because buildings do produce a lot of carbon, right? So we want to go into this space for two reasons. One, it's a major opportunity. I don't want to say it's low-hanging fruit because that makes it sound easy. It's not. It's going to be hard. But it's an obvious area for us to electrify because if we don't, we're missing a massive opportunity to reduce carbon. The other thing is it's a business opportunity. Edison is an investor-owned utility, so we look at things like this as a potential area for us to perhaps grow our business in one area or another. So this is an important area for us to be going into. The state, as far as we know, is not yet mandating anything around removing gas appliances from your home. I seriously doubt that they will, although we do live in a progressive state. I don't think it would shock anybody if they did anything from the legislature. We always keep an eye on the legislature because they make decisions about us, sometimes without us, as a power company, so we watch them very closely. We think, though, we don't see this happening. What we will probably see, and we're already seeing it in some cities that are leading the way, most of them start with the word SAN. You can probably imagine what some of those progressive cities might be. They're making it harder for builders of new construction to gasify buildings. San Francisco, Berkeley, San Jose, Santa Monica. These are essentially stretch goals for the builders. They're not, we're not seeing this at the state level yet, but could the state adopt a similar policy? Perhaps. I want to make it clear, though, Edison is not interested in taking away gas stoves. We, though, want to, if you want to go electric, we want to make it easier for you. Just like if you want to go EV, we want to make it easier for you to drive an EV, and we are. And just like we're making it easier to drive EVs, we're going to make it easier for you to install electric appliances if you want to. And if at some point there's a mandate involved, of course, we'll have already been there, making sure that this happens in a more efficient, economically viable way. But we don't want choice to be taken away. We do want to help the state electrify buildings and all of you electrify buildings if you want to. And so that's ultimately the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If I don't have an answer, I'll get one for you. Thank you so much. Thank you, BIA. Appreciate it.
One more quick round of applause for President Yan, Sarah, and Mark. And if there are any questions for any of the three, we can field those now. We'll have them come back up and do some quick answers. We don't want to run too much longer, but if there are any questions, or we said we could do some one-on-ones if there was any detailed RENA questions. And everybody enjoys so much. Councilman, yes, sir.
You mentioned